okay with that, that we're recording it so that it can be used at a later date. So, Marcia, are you staying on with us? Are you?
Oh, yes, of course.
Okay, great. Just, we hadn't really talked through how this would go.
I'm sorry. That's
so. I'm going to start with a song because that's how I start everything. And it's a one-liner, and it came from my journal. And here it is. All I want on any given day is to make a small difference in some way. All I want on any given day is to make a small difference in some way. You might think, why would you start with that? So the topic of the evening is elevated acts of service and how to make a difference in the lives of people who are grieving. So I'm going to start with a little story about what happened almost 19 years ago. I woke up on a Monday morning, and one of my children did not wake up that morning. Completely out of the blue, no warning, no nothing. And in the days that followed, in the Jewish practice, we opted to sit Shiva the whole week. And every morning after the Shiva gathering in my house, my friend Jim came over and vacuumed. He brought the vacuum from his house a block away. He carried it up the stairs 10 o'clock every morning. That he'd knock on the door and come in and vacuum because all of the people had tracked in sidewalk salt and schmutz from the outside world. And he didn't ask us, what can I do? He just saw something that needed to be done and did it. And it gave me the idea that sometimes those little things are the things that when you add them together make the biggest difference. Likewise, the women that I am in a women's group with came together at my house 2 weeks after my son died, and they made this shawl for me. I don't know if you can see all of it, some of it.
Beautiful.
And I was so moved by it that at some point I started writing about it, and then I started making them with people. And again, these are small things. You know, one applique is one friend, but when you put it around you, it feels like a hug that lasts. When I have other friends that have joined me in this grief journey that I've been on, I like to talk about what the things are that help. So by way of asking you to introduce yourselves, my name's Marge. I didn't even start with that. But tell me the most helpful thing you've ever either done yourself when you've been asked to comfort someone who's had a loss, or that someone has done for you. So I would love us to be compiling a list of the things that help. You want to start, Miss Jude?
She's calling me out. It's all good.
Well, you're next to me on the screen. So.
Oh, that's fun. That's all good. Everything. There's so many that I can think of that have come forward for me, and I just wanted to, but I'll just choose one.
Okay.
Ms. Marge was one special person who's written 2 CDs that you might know about. And one of the songs she's written is called The Family Blessing. So in 1998, I got something called breast cancer. So Marge came up because I had a head shaving in my house, and she buzzed me. She was a great buzzer, buzz our kids' heads and stuff. And I didn't have my family in at that time. I didn't want to freak them out. They were high school, whatever kids, younger than my husband. But I had a bowl of eggs. It doesn't matter. What most important is, I mean, it was great. And then in addition, Marge came in and sang family blessing, because then my family came in, my two sons and my husband. And it was really beyond words. I mean, beautiful. And I'm still here today, and we're still friends. We knew each other before that. So thank you. And giving off to
I did not plan that. I just want you to know.
That's for sure. And I didn't know that there was going to be a question.
Okay.
Can I give one time or give other people some time right now? I was
Let's
going to
give
say
some other people a chance to tell us
Exactly.
your name. So your
Okay.
name is Judy, and I've
oh,
known
my
you
nail on is a
I think
Zoom.
38
thank God.
years.
Yeah, about 38.
Yeah. Joanne?
Select one. I guess a most recent one pops into my head. My father's passed away last March, and he passed away out of town and was buried out of town. But when I came back, folks at my synagogue convinced me that I should have a shiva there. And I'm in a women's group at the synagogue, and the women just came together and planned it and brought all kinds of food and just were there for me. My community was there.
Yeah. They took a burden off of your shoulders. I love that. Shifra, can you add something?
What was something that was, what are you saying, Ben? Could you repeat the question one more time?
So my question was, so I had this, what's the best response to grief that you've ever been able to offer, or that has been offered to you?
God, my husband passed away less than a year ago. I could think of a million things, but I think the first one that comes to mind would probably be planning my husband's unveiling. And I was so overwhelmed by it because I had also just received word that I had to have a breast biopsy. It ended up being fine, but it all kind of was happening at the same time. And I was just so overwhelmed, and people were coming from out of town, and I didn't know which end was up. And it was my sister that just kind of, like you said, with the vacuuming, took the bull by the horns and was like, okay, what were you thinking? Ripped out a piece of paper and started writing things down. And miraculously, there was food for 3 days here for people that were in town for his unveiling. It was wonderful. And I didn't have to think about a thing.
Yes. Go, sister.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I don't know who joined us. That there's Michelle.
Michelle joined us. Thank you for coming, Michelle. We're glad
Oh,
you.
thank you. Yeah, hi. So I'm Michelle. I'm the sandwich person right now. So my mom passed away 14 months ago, and I was her caregiver for 3 years. And my dad's in the hospital as we speak. He's 91. She was 93. So I'm the burden carrier. And I don't know. I usually offer friendship and support when people I know lose someone. I don't ask for help. That's probably part of the problem, but I paid helpers to people to help me when my mom was dying, and my two sons were here and helpful, but I didn't ask anybody, and just sort of carry my way through it. So I'm usually the one helping people, but I'm carrying everybody too. That's me.
Thanks for sharing that. And my heart goes out to you. There should be people you can ask for help. That's part of what being in community is. So I hope you find them. Are you in Orange County? Is that how you connected to this?
No, I listened to some of their things, but I'm like an hour and a half away from Orange County. So I'm in Ventura County, but I'm a fan of Marcia's programs.
Excellent. Everybody needs a fan. And Julie.
Hi.
Hi.
Yeah, so Marge actually lives quite close to me, like 5 blocks away. But we've been friends, I don't know, close to 20 years, something like that. Something like that. I specialize in working with grieving families. I'm a mental health counselor, and I am also in the middle of anticipatory grief. My mother has Alzheimer's, and I recently moved my parents here to Seattle from Florida. So it's very interesting being the person who helps and then the person who needs help. I love working with children. I worked at a place called the Healing Center in Seattle. And what I loved best about working with them was that there was a place for them to go that normalized grief. Mostly their daddies had died and some their moms. But everybody in that room was grieving, and we would do art and music and read stories and lots of hugs. And I actually miss doing that work. I did a lot of it and I really miss it. And now having a really hard time with mom and finding that I'm being a little insular. I'm usually the one inviting people to things. And like Judy was saying, I think it was Judy who was saying, I'm usually the one who invites people, or maybe that was Michelle. I'm usually that person, and I'm having a hard time asking for help. So I guess that's where I am at right now.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing all of that. Marcia, do you have something you'd like to add to this conversation? I don't know if she wandered off. If the sign on the screen means she's not actively here. So I was thinking about how Anderson Cooper's got a new season of his podcast on understanding grieving. And I found, I went looking in my bookcase, and I have like a stack of books on love and loss. But books aren't the way that I learn best. I really learn best by actually talking to people and being in their world and finding out what's going on with them. Not to say I don't pick up another book. Like, I just met the author of this book on Zoom. She's also a friend of a friend. And she wrote a book called Leading Through Loss. And it's really about grief and the workplace. And she's got, I think it's a book that anybody who's employed should make sure their bosses and their bosses should have, because I think it's really an important thing. I used to talk about parenting while grieving. So when I was in my early 30s, I had my twins. And when they were 2 years old, my mom died of metastatic ovarian cancer. And so from the time I got married, and my mother-in-law had breast cancer and she died the first year I was married. And then a few years go by and then my mom dies, and I've got twin 2-year-olds, and then I have another one, and then another one. And, there's just I remember the day my now ex-husband and I looked at each other and said, wow, we are not actively waiting for someone to die. Because we'd lost grandparents, great grandparents to our kids. It was the kind of thing that if you were doing an assessment as a mental health therapist, you would have said, these people are off the charts. Off the charts. A move, twins, preemie twins, let's make it clear. And then one of them had cancer, but he didn't die. And, and then you just start layering it on. And one of the things that I realized in this crazy journey that I've been on is that there is, and I love the bell curve, right? There is a way that we can stay in the middle of the bell curve, because if you find yourself out on the edges, you're diagnosable. But if you can keep yourself in the range of normal, you're good to go. So sometimes we're a little more knocked over this way, and sometimes we're a little more knocked over that way. But if we can find what sort of a range of normal is, we can move forward, because we're not going to be knocked down by grief. Feeling, I was listening to that, I just mentioned Anderson Cooper. I was listening to the podcast, the interview he just did with Stephen Colbert, and I recommend it so hard. And he said, the podcast is called All There Is. Colbert said, grief opens the door to another you, to a better you, about feeling all the feelings. So most people, when they find themselves faced at, I cry as easily as I laugh, which is a blessing in some ways. I fully and completely embody my grief and my joy. I think that when I encounter somebody who's like, I'm not going to be upset, or I'm not going to cry about that, my heart goes out to them. It's like, well, of course you're going to cry. But even I can tell you that you can't cry forever, right? If you lose a child, it's horrific. But I didn't cry 24 hours a day. There is a moment where you just, wipe the snot from your face and say, all right, I need a drink of water, or, somebody come give me a hug, or something changes so that you cannot physically cry always. So here we are talking about, well, what are those, what can we do? What can we say to people? How can we show up in their world to make that small difference? And Marcia, you walked away when I was going to ask you what your best grief response for someone you lost, or that you've been able to offer.
I mean, it's not as I was thinking about that. My two most traumatic losses were my mother, right when I was a new mother, and then my sister. And I would say that it feels very simple, but just having people come over and bring food and set the table and clean up, and both times, I mean, they both, you know, they had strong community, and this gets into the whole, what about those people who don't, you know, have that, but both, but just so that the family could visit with people, and someone would bring you a cup of coffee if you needed it, and things like that. I think there's a reason why food is so central. It feels nurturing. It is nurturing. And probably what I'm thinking, Marge, is those same people vacuumed, meaning all the people that the traffic in the house, they made sure that the house was clean for the next day, for the next, you know,
The next
onslaught
round.
of people, right? So I think those things are really important. But then what I'm also hoping we'll talk about is like what happens 2 weeks later, a month later, 6 months out. I think that grieving people still need support, and it's maybe a different kind also, you know, just think people to talk to or whatever. But I think people taking care of us during Shiva was immeasurably helpful.
Yeah. I think, you know, I can tell people what was really unhelpful. You know, I hate to go to the negative, but I can tell you that there were some really unhelpful things that people said. I lived in dread of somebody of another faith tradition saying, "Oh, your son's in a better place." I'd be like, "Oh, honestly, no. The best place he could be is right here. Don't lay that on me." Or actually an Orthodox rabbi who said, "God doesn't give you more than you can handle." And I just about lost it in front of 1,000 people because I'm standing next to a casket thinking, are you crazy? How do you think that's helpful? People say things like, well, you'll get over it, or time heals all. And you're like, how about, hey, Marge, I'll call you in a couple of weeks. Let's go for a walk. Or on some random Tuesday night, you'll pick up the phone and say, I just had a flash that you might want to have you might have a new story about your son. You got something else. There's some, you know, maybe there's somebody else that you want to be, that you remembered a story that you didn't get to tell during the week of Shiva. Hello. I see Jackie just joined us. So, you know, there's this idea that we have that we have an obligation, if we're in community, to show up when somebody dies. But I think Marcia is absolutely right. What are we doing in the follow-up? Are we remembering to reach out when it's when it's your loved one's birthday? Are we reaching out when it's their yard site? Are we calling and saying, hey, I'm going to go to Yisker because it's Passover, and I know there's an opportunity for us to like have that pressure release valve, and we're going to go and just remember to say their names again. I had the honor to lead a Yisker service at my synagogue this year, and yeah, Julie was there, and I told everybody, you know, I feel like when we've lost people, it's like they're all out in the backyard of our minds, of our memories. So I just go to the back door and I kind of open the door and I look out and I'm like, I just want to tell you what I've been teaching in your name. I want to let you know where I've been this year, who I've met, who my new friends are, you know, because life has continued since that loss. And that's something that we get sort of stuck in the grief part, you know. And I'm thinking about what you had said, Michelle, about, you know, your mom dying 14 months ago and you're actively waiting, you're in limbo right now. And but those 14 months, other stuff has happened. Maybe something joyful has happened. Maybe somebody got married, or there was a grandbaby, or, like there's so many things that happen after our loved one dies. And to be able to have the scope, the ability to remember to stay calibrated in that range of normal, so that we can say, yes, I'm grieving, and that I loved somebody, and they're not here for me to talk to, or at least not to answer back, but I can still talk to them. And I'm not saying I go to the cemetery and, like have a picnic. I have done that, but just once, and it wasn't my kid. It was a great aunt. But sometimes, it's like you just want a way, you want to be able to know that you have the skills to respond when someone else is grieving, and to know how to ask for what you need when it's you who's going through that. So, Jackie, I know you joined us a little bit late, and everybody's names are, I think, in their little boxes so that you can meet people. But I'm Marge, and hi. And I just had to ask everyone if they have a thought about a best response, like when you went through something that you would call grief or grieving. What was the best thing that somebody did to help you through, to walk you?
They hugged me.
Pardon?
They hugged me.
They hugged
They
you.
gave me a hug, because from my experience, I don't think there is anything that I can say that's going to make it better. But when somebody gives me a hug and I feel connected with that person, it gives me a connection. I don't know how it makes it, but it connects me with that person who gives me a hug.
Absolutely. It's heart to heart.
Yes.
That's the best
I
part
mean,
about hugs.
and then I know some people who were saying things to me, I felt like I needed to comfort them because what they were saying to me, they weren't coping with. I mean, it's my son who passed away. On the 3rd will be 2 years since he passed away.
Mm.
And people don't know how to grieve or how to comfort people. And that first month after Dan passed away, didn't matter what people said. It was all wrong. It was all wrong. But a hug was okay.
Okay.
A hug,
Are you still
I
getting
see
hugs?
people once in a while, not too many. People forget, people go on with their lives. It's almost 2 years. It'll be 2 years this weekend, And all I can say is it went by so fast. I just don't know how it went 2 years already, and we finally cleaned out his storage, and it was like we were trying not to cry, but we were all crying because we had to do something with the stuff. You can't keep it indefinitely. It was hard. It was hard.
Mhm.
And we found a bunch of photos when he was at Camp Hess Kramer, when he was a lifeguard there. It was like looking at Dan, who was 16, and he died. He was 50. He was almost 50 when he died. And it was just all these memories. And it was a bittersweet Thanksgiving weekend. Josh and Seraphine came here, and they helped me out with getting this closed. And we cried, we laughed, we had Thanksgiving. Uh, we did the best we could, and we're just moving forward.
Mhm.
It's just hard. And I found myself, somebody asked me, a new person, how many children I had. And I was proud to say I was able to say I have 3 children, 2 living. And that was really like a milestone for me to be able to do that, to able to say, I have still 3 children.
Yes.
That was really hard.
Yeah.
Thank you for asking me to share. I can't help it. I'm crying.
Oh, please, I would be giving you a hug right now if I could.
Thank you.
My son who died, his birthday is December 3rd. So you and I are going to be connected forever.
Yes.
And it is that cycle of love and loss that makes me want to do this work, that makes me willing to go into this conversation and say, are there things that we can be doing better? And I think a lot of the pain in the world, a lot of that ability to make other people be other, is because we really don't teach people about grief. We don't teach people that it's active. We don't teach people that it's your responsibility to try and make things better. And it doesn't mean you can make the death go away, but you can offer a hug, and you can show up and vacuum after the Shiva schmutzes up the house.
Right.
You
Well,
know?
in America, especially, people don't do grieving. They try to pretend it didn't happen.
Well, and the main culture that we live in, you know, that was one of the things that I was telling them. I just found this book called Leading Through Loss. Most bereavement policy is 3 days. Doesn't matter who you lose. You're supposed to be able to go back to work after 3 days. If you have a heart attack, your colleagues would pick up the slack for 6 weeks.
Yeah.
But if you have a loss, you get 3 days and then show up again and you're fine. And that's just not compassionate, and it's not reasonable, and it doesn't it makes you know, your brain is a fog when you lose somebody. There's just like cotton candy up there. You can't make decisions.
I couldn't get out of bed for a month. If my kids weren't here bringing me coffee to bed and say, it's okay, mom, stay in bed, I would have ended up in a loony bin. I just couldn't stop crying. And Marcia knows because she was there. You know, I couldn't stop crying. I couldn't do anything. And I don't know if other people, but when my parents passed away, it was different. But I was younger and they lived a full life.
Mm-hmm.
You know, older when they passed away. But with my son, I just couldn't wrap my head around the fact that my child passed away before me. I
Right.
just couldn't wrap it around.
I want to tell you that when my son, who was 12 when he died, somebody actually said to me, well, where is it written that parents should die before children?
Where?
I was like, are you kidding? Like, but anyway, so that goes in the unhelpful category.
Yes.
Things that people should never say out loud. Even if you think it, you should never say it. It's good that we learn these things, right? Hey, Marcia.
You know, I'm thinking about, you know, Marge, just, you know, in terms of creating this template. So I just, from your personal journey, what are some things that happened for you 3 months out, 6 months out, 9 months out that you remember that were different, you know, from the initial vacuuming and that kind of thing? Anything, I don't know.
Okay. So because my son died in this bizarre, like didn't wake up and we didn't know what was wrong. You know, they did an autopsy and they're like, oh, sorry, we don't know why he's gone either. You know, there's no sign of illness or drugs, or there's no harm. He's just not alive anymore. And so a couple of months out, a little congregation in northern Illinois, in invited me to come lead services. It was the first time I'd gone there to do that since the loss. And they were like, you know, if you can still sing, we want you to come. And I was like, yes, I can still sing. Because so I started being asked to do things, not work necessarily, but to participate in life. And then I went to Israel for a month, and I taught English to Israeli immigrants for 2 weeks. And everywhere I went, I had the sense that the world was, or I don't know how to explain it, but I felt like nobody was going to mess with me ever again. All I know is that every place I went and everybody I met was like, they allowed me to talk about my son and about this loss, but they also knew that I had other things that I was thinking about and cared about. And I had written a bunch of music, and I was in the midst of, I had recorded a CD in the months after he died, like at Passover. So he died at Tu B'Shvat, and at Passover, I recorded a whole album because there's an old spiritual that says, how can I keep from singing? And it was like my sanity. It turned out, we found out what my son died from is called long QT syndrome. It's a heart rhythm problem. We've saved other people by telling about his story, including one of his brothers and their dad, who also has this heart rhythm problem. Nobody knew about it. We couldn't have known. But the thing is, because I have this art form to get music out into the world, I was able to take my grief and like move it around. I didn't have to stay stuck with it. So I wrote 2 songs after he died. One of them is called We're in Each Other's Lives. And I recorded it with like a rock band of just screaming electric guitar solos. It was raucous, just the kind of thing that kid would have loved. And then I wrote another one that I called Enduring One, and I recorded the piano, and I had a microphone in front of me because I had lyrics, but I couldn't sing it. I finished playing it, and the engineer said, well, weren't you going to sing? And I opened my mouth and I was like, well, play it back and I'll see if I can sing to the track. I got about 3 words in and just exploded in tears and said, I will never sing that song. And so to this day, I honestly don't know what it sounds like. I know what the piano sounds like because I recorded that. That's fine. I will never sing it. 3 months out, to have a friend who would say, my family wants to bring dinner to you. And I was able to say back to them, well, if you're going to cook, why don't you just come here and cook and stay and have dinner with us? Be there with us. Don't just drop, like it's a bag of poop at the door and ring the doorbell. Come in, help us feel normal again. That was one of the things that I remember most. And then every year on his yahrzeit, at least the first 7 or 8 years, I hosted some kind of event, whether it was a concert in his memory or a pizza party or something. I gathered people who knew him and, made sure that people knew. And then when it was the 10th year, I created an event for the 10th yahrzeit. I'd never really thought about surviving for 10 more years, right? Like it was such a big deal. And obviously my mom's been gone for like 32 years. So, like it doesn't surprise me that I could make it for 10 years actively grieving. But when I did that, I think there were 60 people there for an event that nobody had any idea what to expect. All they wanted to do was come be part of whatever it was I had dreamed up. What a blessing to be able to create something like that. So I think when I talk about, this grief journey and who we walk this with, I think it's very much about, who just is going to show up. And I have good friends in my life who, Judy knew Baki. I assume Joanne did, sort of like as a little kid running around synagogue. Maybe, but Judy was there when she knew all my kids as babies. Julie and I met right after Baki died, but he is still a character in my world. So I think that that's one of the most important things in how we teach about grief, is that it's okay. Take your cue from the person who's grieving, but man, is it helpful to hear a story about him, or about my family or whatever.
Well, Baki shook at ballet baseball, and
Right.
he was a phenomenal, not only baseball player, softball player, he was an amazing athlete.
Yeah.
And such a sweet wee. Good to see him face. So cute.
What about you? Do you want to hear stories about your loved ones? Does it bring comfort? Do you, when you were at Thanksgiving last week, were you able to talk to people?
I did, because we went to my brother-in-law, and Danny passed away like a week after Thanksgiving, and it was his wish. He insisted on going to my brother-in-law's, and I had to give him lots of pain medication. He had cancer. So, and he insisted, he said, I want to go see all those babies, because my brother-in-law has lots of little grandchildren. And so when we were there, those grandchildren were there, and they were just causing havoc, running under the tables. And Paul was trying to get him to stop. I says, no, just let him. It reminds me how Dan enjoyed having those little kids run around all over the place, and so that was a good memory, because this is what he wanted. And he wanted to be with those kids. And he even told my other son, he told him, Josh, you and Sarah can just get married before I die. Just be done with it. And they did. They just had their second wedding anniversary on a Tuesday before Thanksgiving.
Wow.
And it was like, that's a beautiful thing. Thank you. I thought I was the only one that cried at that. But it was such a beautiful thing for him to have such a wish for them to have
I
a
hope
life.
that everybody is. Don't you always sit down at these things with a box of Kleenex and a glass of water?
Right. But that kind of memory was good. And then we looked through all those pictures of Dan. Josh would tell us stories, because he was a camper at Camp Hess Kramer, while Daniel was the pool guy. He was the lifeguard over there. There was lots of stories. That was many, many years ago, and we sat there and we talked about it. And that's why I said that whole week was bittersweet, but
Mhm.
it was sweet as well as bitter. We did crying, but we also played his music and we danced.
Good.
So
Anybody else want to jump in? And what's helpful to you as we keep going?
dancing is something that, oh, go ahead, Rabbi
Oh,
Marsha.
go ahead, Judy. What were you going to say?
I was going to say that a circle of friends is always helpful. Come from a very large family. Herstian's not it's a married name. And having dancing, having music. I come from Sephardi and Ashkenazi, my mother being Ashkenazi, my father being Sephardi. And having music. I have an 88-year-old aunt who's living in Laguna Woods. She's going strong. Sings beautifully. Used to sing the Romanceros, but for me, dance is really got me through my cancer business, everything business, but cancer, and music for me is really a way to move. And
So but I'm curious, one of the things I'm wondering, Judy, is did people encourage you to do that? Or were you instinctively able to do that on your own?
I just listen to myself.
You listen to yourself.
Yeah.
Because that might be one of the ways that in the duration term, after the initial, the deep grief, it's always deep, but to be able to encourage, to offer to people, if you know them well enough, opportunities for them to, be and do in meaningful ways. I remember there was a tragic loss of a 16-year-old girl, a friend of my daughter's, in the community, just horrific. Her parents are still not over it, I can tell you now, but I just remember, like, people would take her mother out to lunch at least once a week, just because, and I think that probably was helpful,
Yeah.
so.
It's you never get over, as you probably know. You adapt to what your new normal is. The question to me is, can we give some, so we coined a phrase in our family that was, there's no competitive grieving. Because one person, especially because I had twins, right? So I have two 15-year-olds at the time of their younger brother's death. One of them was much more interior than the other. Like, you can't say that one's doing a better job of grieving than the other one. The conversation was very much like, the night he died, I remember sitting everybody down in the living room and saying, look, this is going to hurt. There's no way to avoid it. There's no way that you can't drink or drug or, or shut away this grief. You have to sit with it until it can become something else. Stephen Colbert talked about it today on this podcast I listened to, saying, there's actually a gift in it, because it allows you to be even closer and more real when you respond to somebody else's loss. And I think that that's the part that just wakes me up every day and says, oh yeah, I think because I've suffered loss, it makes me more able to show up for other people.
Marge, what was the impetus for that interview? I'm not so tuned into the lives of either man.
Anderson Cooper and Stephen Colbert share a tragic, both of them lost their dads when they were 10-year-olds. So Anderson Cooper had been writing about grief, learning about grief after his mom died in 2019. His older brother, he only had one sibling, had died by suicide a few years earlier, and their dad had died of heart disease when, at age 50, whatever. Colbert's father and two of his older brothers had died in a plane accident.
Mm.
And they had there's a podcast, and this is the second season of it, that Anderson Cooper is doing about grieving. And he said he had 46 hours of comments from listeners sharing their story about grief, which is part of why I feel like one of the ways to restore the common humanity and decency that we are all searching for in our world right now is to actively talk to people about love and loss. And how are we showing up for each other? And can we come up with kind of a protocol? What do we say to people, actively when somebody's in those first days? All you can say is, if I'm here and I will listen. I'm here for a hug. I'll clean a cabinet. I'll make a meal, whatever. I'll do whatever I can. But you can't really ask the person what they need. Once they get a little more clarity, you can say, do you have a sense of what would be helpful to you?
Mm.
And ask people, because different people are different. When my grandpa died in 1967, I remember we didn't talk about him. We were told that would make grandma too sad. We never mentioned him. Grandma died in 1988. For 21 years, nobody said anything to her about him. I'm not sure that was such a good thing. It would have killed me to not be able to talk about it, to not be able to talk about that loss. So I think that when we ask people what would be helpful to you, and not how are you feeling, but what's going on today, like be a little more specific, be a little more thoughtful. Don't lay your he's in a better place, ideas onto somebody else. Just to know that somebody else is thinking about you is huge, right? So as you're thinking about, I'm hoping that I don't know why you all joined. I mean, I assume a couple of you joined because I said, please, I want to make sure there's people there.
There was a song I heard that I thought might be sung.
Oh,
But when you sang that, it was so wonderful.
Oh, that's a beauty.
And you're
All
so
right, I will sing it for you because it's a new one that I just wrote. I'm going to ask you to think about your answer to that question. What brought you here? And while you do that, I will sing to you. How's that? Deal? Everybody loves to be sung to. So this song emerged this fall. As I said, my mom died 32 years ago. And all of a sudden, this is what arrived. You're too bright a light to burn out. These were the last words my mom said to me. You're too bright a light to burn out. She really knew me. She saw me. I'd say I couldn't cheat gently at night, yet she'd sit down beside me, say, let's take a look. How could we solve this together? Difference, not better or worse. To be fair doesn't mean that I'll treat you the same. Difference, not better or worse. She really got us. She loved us. Every so often I still hear her voice. It comes out of my mouth. You have a choice. Offer your help. Remember, the world needs your joy. The world needs your smile, your curious mind, your open heart. You're too bright a light to burn out. Some memories fade, but this one stays strong. Too bright a light to burn out. Pass it on, pass it on, pass it on. You're too bright a light. Thank you.
So thank you for asking people why, what about this topic was interesting. Just as a side note, Marge is our first sort of visiting teacher, but at the end of every month, we're going to have a circle of hope and healing with different leaders, people with wisdom to share. I'm hoping next month, maybe Rabbi Joey Krakoff, who runs the Jewish Hospice and Chaplaincy Network, will talk about.
I'm from Michigan
work.
originally. I do know Troy Craig.
Yeah.
Isn't he from Michigan?
Yes, he was. It was the rabbi at
Church Center.
Right. I knew Joey from rabbinical school, but
Oh, sweet.
but I'm also a Michigander, and so that's how.
Oh, great. I'm a
yeah.
Michigander too.
Anyway, so
Nice.
we have Michigan and Wisconsin well represented here. But Shifra, what attracted you to this sort of conversation?
So I do the monthly spousal group with Fran.
With Fran.
So I don't know, thought I'd see
Lovely.
what I could
I'm so
gain from
happy.
it.
Good.
Wonderful. I'm so glad you're here. Thank you, Shifra. And hang on a second. And
Joanne?
Michelle?
Sorry. Because I'm numb. I'm like burnt out from giving, and I don't know. So I just wanted to come and learn and listen. I loved your singing, Marge, and your joy and your love. And my new thing is I'm wearing a chai every day, and I'm just sad about Israel and the world, and I'm grieving for all the people. And I just feel really sad about what's been unleashed with all this hatred for Jews and Israel. And I mean, my mom lived to 93 and was barely sick in her life. So I have a lot of gratitude, for her. So I'm not like overly grieving. It wasn't a horrific, tragic loss like losing your child. I can't even imagine that. So, I don't know. I'm just carrying, I guess, sadness. I can't cry. I mean, it's not that I don't want to. I just don't. Maybe if I start, I won't stop because of all the sadness in the world. I don't know. But the singing brought joy, and it reminded me how much I love music and dancing, and maybe I need to do that more. So I don't mean to be such a downer. I just, and I'm not.
I don't expect everybody to show up on a program about grief and just giggle.
Right. I
Honest.
mean, so I'm
Wrong.
I mean, it's not a bad thought, Julie.
Michelle,
So-
I want to say something too, if I may. What you just said is so profound, because right now, even though I did not think of this when Marge and I were planning, what is this conversation going to be? But so many Jewish people who haven't had necessarily a death, but a personal death, but are grieving for all the things that you brought up. And I think that's something that we should all consider. Like, what can we do for each other in this really fragile, tenuous, unimaginable time? Actually, I mean, we've lived long enough where we could sort of skirt around it. We've known that Henry Ford hated the Jews, and so did Walt Disney, and whatever. And then Jews are, at the top of Disney now. So your sense is that like things work out, but the question is this ever going to work out? And what's the new normal? And what about our children? And gewalt, gewalt, gewalt. So we have to think about also how we can help people, not just with a death loss, but with the loss of an ideal and a trajectory and a path and a long-term hope. And so I really want to thank you for elevating this to even something more broad. And Joanne, I just would like to know too, for you, what brought you to our group today?
Marge.
Oh, Marge. Okay.
I mean, our paths certainly have walked together for a while, from the fact that we both have the same birthday, couple different years, but close.
Which
But
is,
pardon?
what's your birthday?
May 16th.
Yay.
So I'm Facebook friends with Marge, so I gain a lot of insights and joy from your posts. And you posted about this. And over the past 2+ years, my family's experienced a lot of deaths. And recently, Marge and I have a mutual friend whose husband, who died. And last week, another
Of the
friend.
vacuum cleaner
That's
story.
right.
Yeah.
And we were at Shiva together for him and the
Yep.
funeral. But since then, another friend's husband passed away. So I have people to support as well. So there's a lot of reasons I'm here.
Yeah. And I'm going to tell you to give Judith a hug for me too.
I will do that.
Please do that.
I might even call her when we're done if it's not, because I've been thinking about her as we're talking here.
Yeah. The so we've talked a little about, things that were helpful. When I was talking with Fran and Marcia face to face, I was in Southern California, got to meet them face to face. And we were talking, and I said, one of my favorite moments was when somebody brought, good coffee to the Shiva Minyan. I was like, everybody brings bakery, but wow, that was so nice to get something else. There's just little things that people did. People showed up when I was recording. They thought they were just going to be an audience for me, but I made them sing. It was great. But honestly, I think the biggest thing was the random knock on my door saying, hey, come on, let's go for a walk. Or I haven't seen you in a while. Let's get together and go out. Or this wonderful musician, Sam Glazer, was coming to Milwaukee and doing a concert for an Orthodox Jewish day school. And my kids were going to the liberal Jewish day school. And he said, Marge, I want everybody to be there with you. Let's make it a joint project. So this was like within the 30-day period of mourning. And so we were all there to be part of music together. The kids in his soccer team, they came up with starting every soccer game, one man down for 10 seconds because his number was 10. And they planted a tree in his memory. And when those boys were seniors in high school, they called me and said, before our last game, we just want you to know, we want to meet you with a tree that we planted in his memory. Tell me that they have forgotten him. It's not possible. It's not possible. The week before Thanksgiving, one of those teammates was here at my house with his mom and his older brother and his girlfriend. And, they were hanging out with me out here in Washington. 3 of those other teammates had gotten together and called me and said, we're visiting Oliver and we would love to have brunch with you. So I think that the long game of love and loss is that we continue to tell stories in their names, and we continue to give people permission to bring them up. So, I don't only want to talk about my son as a great athlete, because he was 12. Let's be real. He was very talented, but great. He was great for his age. But what I really want is for people to tell stories about, I would love for you to feel comfortable telling a story that you haven't gotten to tell lately. Tell us a story about your husband, Shifra, or tell us a story about your mom, Michelle, that, feel that this is a safe place and that this is the act of elevating those acts of service, is that we're all willing to listen to a story. And sometimes those stories just aren't easy to access when you're in the first throes of grief. You got one?
Can I twist it around and ask a different question?
Sure.
I've done enough talking with my therapist recently
Oh.
about my husband. I'm a little bit curious. I hear what you're saying when you cringe at people saying things like, they're in a better place, and I agree with you. Those are like, ugh, I get that. But what about the people that say nothing at all? Like the people that just like avoid you like the plague or have nothing to say? Would it be better if they did say they're in a better place, so at least they're acknowledging it? Well,
And this is the question that we're asking on the bigger scene about what's going on in Israel right now, right? How are we noticing who is actually speaking to us and who is not? Who is asking, how are you handling all of this? I want you to know that I'm appalled and I'm your ally. So in the way that I look at it with grief, when the people don't say anything, that's one of the reasons we used to have the cultural signifier, right? Like if you were in mourning, you wore a Kriya ribbon, but you wore black. If you were a widow, you wore black for like a year, and then you were in half mourning and you wore lilac and, like gray, right? We don't have a way to tell people what's going on. If they know, and they aren't saying anything to you, they are signaling they don't have a connection.
or the fact that we don't teach
they're
people how to
uncomfortable.
grieve in our society. They just don't know.
They don't know what to say. So
They don't know what
not
to
saying
say.
anything better than saying something. My feeling is not saying something is hurtful, but I don't
But
know.
we've all experienced it, so we know better by now. Like, of course, I miss my husband terribly, but I feel like I've learned a lot how to treat the next one.
Okay. It's really hard to know how to answer that, right? What would, like the snarky part of me, which is very small, but every so often she comes out. The snarky part of me is like, oh, I'm sure I didn't hear you, but yeah, I miss him a lot. I just like bring it up and say, it's been really hard to find something else to talk about, because this is really the thing that is the most important in my life right now. But maybe, you know, maybe there's a way for you to say it's not contagious. I mean, as a divorced woman, I worked really hard to make sure I did not lose my friends who were married people, because divorce feels contagious and death feels like, I will tell you, when my son died in his sleep and nobody knew why, the parents who had only children were practically setting up baby monitors again. Like, if one kid could die, that means another kid could die. And it was hard. I don't know what the right answer is.
I remember going to the theater where Mika was, pulled him out of the theater and said, that's my younger son who's now 35. I said, we're going to Milwaukee now. He was at backstage, and I said, it's time to go now. And he was very stunned, and obviously, and stays connected to Marge in his heart, as when we were there for Thanksgiving, he quoted Marge, and he, so I don't think Marge knew because we didn't talk about this, but that's and something you didn't mention, Marge, and I don't know who created it, but you also had bracelets made, which I have in the back room, like, you know what the Livestrong bracelets look like, rubber bracelets, a Baki bracelet.
Live life, love life.
Right. Having something tangible like that, just to connect peace, remember.
It's important.
Very.
Jackie, you trying to say something?
No, I'm just listening to everybody.
Okay. And somebody else just joined us.
Yes, this is Brenda. I just joined you. Sorry I'm late. I forgot it was Thursday. I kept thinking it was Friday all day.
Oh, nope. Still Thursday. A very dark Thursday, but it's dark all the way across country now. Does anybody else have a response to Shifra, though? I'm really curious what do we do when people aren't reaching out, aren't saying something? How do we then ask for what we need?
Well, you know, sometimes I just let it go because I figured that I don't need to be taking care of them. I have enough problems taking care of myself. So I'll reach out to somebody who I know will give me that hug, or somebody who is open to say, let's go to lunch or whatever, because I figure that person just has their own problems. And I don't need to be taking care of another person. I need to take care of myself. And maybe that's kind of weird, but I've learned.
No, I think it's very healthy.
I mean, through other issues in my life, I learned I have to take care of myself first. And if somebody isn't there, I just walk the other way and I go to somebody who will give me that hug or will talk to me. Because, like the saying goes, don't look for those who aren't there, love the ones who are with you. You know, that's kind of what I'm doing, you know, not going to try to get somebody who has their own thing, you know. But I figure people who aren't talking to me, they have their own problems. I don't need to solve them. That's my opinion. It may be rude and I may not like it, but you know what? It's not my business.
Okay. I can live with
In
that.
response to Shifra, I just, if somebody says that to me, you know, like,
Not acknowledging your loss.
yeah, or saying what you had said earlier, Marge, which I already forgot, but it's not a good thing to say.
Oh,
oh,
he's
they're
in
in a better place.
I
I
was
kind of
more
look at it as,
responding to the person who just doesn't acknowledge it, who doesn't,
Right. All I'm
doesn't
looking
even
for is
say, oh, I
acknowledgement.
heard, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
right.
I just
And
want,
so,
it just feels good to have some acknowledgement, just to,
and
Yeah.
it can
This
open
past
up a
Saturday-
conversation. It can open
this
up a
past Saturday, I
discussion.
was at a birthday party for my 95-year-old aunt, and there were plenty of people there that had not seen me since my husband had passed away. And it's like, just don't pretend that he never existed. Just acknowledge, we can go talk about something else, but just say, hey, I was really sorry to hear about Martin. How are you doing? Or did you have a nice Thanksgiving? Whatever. I wasn't looking for
You
a
didn't,
long
it wasn't
drawn-out
all
convers-
about you.
Right. But it just, if people just don't acknowledge it, that to me is just, I don't know. That's really all that I'm looking for. Just acknowledge that he existed.
Shifra, I want to share something really interesting that happened to me. So I'm a clergy person. So it's really kind of incumbent upon me, to sort of know that kind of stuff, be kind, and always have an appropriate response. And there's a woman in the community. I don't have a congregation per se, but I know people and they know me. And a woman that I know very well lost her father, and she subsequently lost her mother too after that. But she lost her father, and I had seen a notice. It wasn't I'm a part of her synagogue, and I meant to say, "Oh, I need to call so and so and tell her I'm sorry." And then I forgot. I got a lot on my mind. I'm not very organized. And then I called her for something totally random. And she taught me the most wonderful lesson. I called her, I said, Wendy, I don't know if I needed her to house somebody for Shabbos. I can't remember what it was. And she said, Marge, I lost my father 2 months ago or 3 months ago. And I'd never called her. And I sat, and like, that was the right thing for her to do. And I said, Wendy, I remember seeing that, and I'm so sorry. I mean, I was so remiss, and even more remiss in that not only did I not call you or send you a note, but I called you with something totally random, completely forgetting that. So I really had forgotten. So part of what I want to offer you or any of us is the courage, like this woman, to say, when you're with somebody who knows or should, if they don't know, they should, kind of thing, because they're in your circle, to say, I don't know if you're aware of this, but my husband passed away in March or whatever that is. And I just, I thought you'd want to know. And then you're sort of giving it to them as a gift. You're like, you'd want to know this about me in the same way that I'd want to know that about you. I assume you'd want to know that about me. And, something, I don't know. Is that at all helpful? If as opposed to just sort of like tolerating and going like, what's wrong with them? Because sometimes people are uncomfortable or they forget.
Yeah, I think it's more just uncomfortable.
So putting it out there by you saying, I don't know if you know this, but then you alleviate their discomfort. Not that that's your job, but what you've said is perhaps you didn't know. And and that gives them the opportunity to go, oh, Shifra, either like I did hear, and I'm so sorry I didn't call, or I didn't know. And
but there are people that, like I was talking to, it was a couple. The husband was at my house for Shiva. So you're not going to tell me that she didn't know.
Right.
Kind of thing. But I was talking to her at this party on Saturday. And I'm just thinking, like, she should have, it's the first time I've seen her since he passed away. I think she should have acknowledged it to me.
Yeah.
That's all about, wouldn't you? I would say that that's all about her, Marge. I'd love to know what you think about that.
Right.
I think it's about her and her fear that if you could lose your husband, she could lose hers.
Right.
But also, kind of paraphrasing what Rabbi just said, to say to her, I was so grateful that your husband came to the Shiva for Martin.
Yeah, that would have been good.
You know,
Yes.
just to put it right
Yeah.
out there and say, I realize I haven't seen you since then. It really meant something to me that he showed up for the Shiva Minyan. Now it's in her court. Now, if she doesn't have the skills to respond, then
Yeah,
she's
no,
not
that's
somebody
perfect.
that you're
Thank
gonna.
you both. Thank you.
Well, I think that's what this is about, is that we can help each other. We can help give each other the language for doing this work, this grief work together, because it's not, if you're going to live and you're going to love, you're going to lose, you're going to grieve. Hopefully you'll love again. Some loves are the same, but it's all a cycle. It all comes back. Brenda, I don't know where you want to jump in on the conversation. If you do.
Yeah, my husband committed suicide while talking to me on the phone, so it was quite really abrupt for him thing to do. But I found it really hard to trust any man now to even hold a discussion. And I have a twin sister, and she wasn't very supportive in any of it.
Well,
Wow.
Brenda, are you part of our grief program that meets on Thursday nights with Chaplain Fran?
No.
Well, that might be really something that you would find. A few people on this program tonight do go, and
Okay.
I think find great solace in that. And so I want to invite you to sign up, and that might be very helpful,
Okay.
for you. And I'm glad you popped in. We're just coming to the end of our time. It's a 90-minute session. Marge was our first scholar. I wanted her to close with something that was so inspiring to me.
So this is, I'm going to come back to this. So this is the shawl that my Rosh Chodesh, my women's spirituality group, made for me. And they made it in one night. And I am going to be coming back down to Southern California at the end of January, and I'm going to be making one for the Circle of Hope and Healing group for the Chesed Show.
Chesed Shel Emet group. Yes.
This to me is also one of those elevated things, one of those things that you can do when somebody suffers a loss, is that you can come together as a small community and create something of beauty for them. I call this a hug that lasts, because when I put it on, and I did this every single day at the beginning, I'm not ordained, but I'm kind of a folk rabbi. And I led the Shiva Minyans for when my son died. And all except for the first two. And then every day for the Shloshim, we had a minyan at the kids' school. And once this was given to me, this replaced my talit. I wore this every day, feeling the love of these women supporting me and holding me. And then on Shabbat, I would flip it inside out, so that, because it felt really good to be in with something really dark. And this turned out to be like the healthiest, most holy thing that they could have ever done for me. So this was, this is what I sort of became known for, between that and the songs. Michelle just asked if I have an email, and I would love to be able to, I will put all of that in the in the info, right?
Is it Marge.Eiseman?
It's marge.eiseman@gmail.com.
I'm gonna put it in for everybody.
Okay, thank you. Anyway, I love making these shawls with people. I can't tell you how many. I've probably made hundreds of them by now. And I can do them in a couple of hours. And, you know, we use the music and the stories, and we let people tell their story and show up and be embraced and be blessed. And I did one at that healing center Julie mentioned early on in Seattle with the kids who were all bereaved. All, you know, all the children in that group had lost somebody. And that, you know, my hope is that as we teach people better skills about how to talk about love and loss, and grieving is not something to be fought against, but actually experienced and you move through. I'm going to go back to the beginning. We're going to make a small difference. We're going to make a lot of small differences. So I hope this was a good use of your Thursday evening. I'm so appreciative of you all coming.
Marge, it was beautiful. Thank you so much. For those of you who are kind of local, Marge is going to be with us for a weekend. I hope at the end of January. I think we're like the 27th, 28th, 29th, or something like that. She's going to do a Friday night with us. And oh, Marge, we have somebody else coming in too. Would you like to, Marge, let me ask you this. I can't stay, but if I make you host, would you be willing to visit with those who just entered the room, and if they'd like to talk to you for a little bit?
Mitch. All right. You have to say hi. Turn your microphone off.
Hi.
Hi.
Hey, great to see you, Marge.
It's great to see you.
Yeah.
So Mitchell was one of my students when he was a kid.
She's dating me. She's gonna date me. So.
Yeah, but I think
when I was like 9, Marge was my Hebrew school teacher.
Lucky
And,
you.
I know. Tell me about it. And we've had a great friendship.
Yeah.
And
I won't be able to stay either. I apologize. So I'm going to
no
say
worries.
I just got done teaching, so I just wanted to see if you were on. So you are. That's great.
I am, but everybody, we're just about ending. So how about if you just give me a call on my phone, and we will chat, the two of us. Thank you for showing up. You're a gem. And thank the rest of you for showing up and participating, for opening your hearts. I did learn during my Rosh Chodesh group with Zoom that if you put your hands up, you can really feel the energetic connection of people, just like if you had a ball of chi and you were just like sharing that love and that light with one another. You are all bright lights. Don't let whatever happened to you dim that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So beautiful. Good night, everybody.
Thank you. Good night.
Thanks,
Happy
Marge.
Hanukkah. It's very soon.
And almost happy Hanukkah. Absolutely.
And Shabbat Shalom.
Thank
Shabbat
you.
shalom.
Well, good job.
Good night.
Good night.